Charlie Kirk was born on October 14, 1993, in Arlington Heights, Illinois, a suburban community just outside of Chicago. His parents raised him in a Christian household, instilling in him values of hard work, faith, and perseverance. From an early age, Charlie was known for being outspoken, curious, and unafraid to challenge others in debate. Unlike many who would later rise to prominence in politics, Charlie did not come from privilege or elite schools. He was an ordinary student at Wheeling High School, not the star of his class, but someone with a gift that went beyond grades. His gift was persuasion. He could take an argument, break it down, and rebuild it in a way that convinced others to listen. It was during these years that Charlie's faith in Christianity deepened. Friends recalled that he often talked about the importance of God in his life, and he credited his faith as the anchor that guided his decisions, even in moments of uncertainty. In high school, Charlie also developed an interest in politics. While many of his peers were focused on sports, music, or preparing for college applications, Charlie was volunteering for political campaigns and learning the nuts and bolts of activism. His teachers noticed his sharp focus, and though he wasn't on track for an Ivy League future, he had something that couldn't be taught in textbooks: charisma and conviction. At just 18 years old, instead of following the traditional path of college, Charlie made a decision that would change his life. He chose to put everything he had into a dream of starting something new, something that would give a voice to conservative students who felt silenced on their campuses. That dream became Turning Point USA. In 2012, when Charlie Kirk was just 18 years old, most young adults were focused on choosing colleges, settling into dorms, or figuring out what to do with their lives. But Charlie was different. He had no intention of blending in or waiting for an opportunity to come his way. He was determined to create one for himself. That year, with a mix of boldness and vision far beyond his age, Charlie co-founded Turning Point USA, a non-profit dedicated to promoting free markets, limited government, and conservative values among young people. At first, there was nothing glamorous about it. There were no big donors, no national office, no army of staff. It began with Charlie working out of coffee shops, living on the road, and personally visiting campuses across the country. He drove from college to college, speaking to small groups of students, handing out flyers, and often facing hostile crowds who didn't want his message heard. The mission of Turning Point USA was clear: to give conservative students a voice at schools where they often felt silenced or outnumbered. Charlie believed that young Americans who held conservative beliefs deserved the same opportunity to speak, organize, and defend their values as anyone else. It wasn't easy. In those early years, Charlie faced rejection after rejection. Many administrators dismissed him as too young, too inexperienced, or simply too controversial. But what he lacked in resources, he made up for in persistence. He worked long hours, traveling constantly, often sleeping on couches or in cheap motels just to make the next event possible. His Christian faith gave him strength during those times. Charlie often spoke about how he leaned on God when doors closed in his face, or when people laughed at the idea of an 18-year-old running a national movement. To him, the struggle was proof that his work mattered. Slowly but surely, Turning Point USA began to grow. Students started forming chapters on campuses. Events drew larger crowds. Donors began to notice the energy and conviction Charlie brought to the table. By the mid-2010s, what had started as a one-man mission had become a national movement. Turning Point USA had hundreds of chapters, thousands of student members, and the beginnings of the infrastructure that would one day make it one of the most influential, youth-oriented conservative organizations in the country. At just 20 years old, Charlie was regularly appearing on television, giving interviews, and writing about the challenges conservative students faced. He was no longer just a young activist, he was becoming a national figure. And this was just the beginning. As Turning Point USA gained traction, Charlie Kirk's profile began to rise far beyond college campuses. By the mid-2010s, what had started with a handful of campus chapters had become a nationwide student movement. Charlie was tireless. He spent nearly every week traveling, speaking at universities, hosting leadership conferences, and appearing on television. His message was sharp, unapologetic, and often provocative, that young conservatives should no longer be silent in the face of overwhelming pressure to conform to liberal ideology. By 2015, Turning Point USA had established chapters on hundreds of campuses. Kirk himself became a regular guest on Fox News and other conservative media outlets. His sharp debate style and his ability to frame issues in plain, relatable language made him stand out, but the turning point in Charlie Kirk's career came in 2016, during the election of Donald J. Trump. Helping Trump's campaign, Kirk and Turning Point USA mobilized thousands of young conservatives during the campaign season. While he did not work as an official staffer for Trump's team, his organization played a critical role in energizing the youth vote and providing on-the-ground support in key states. Kirk became known as one of Trump's most loyal allies. He frequently defended Trump's policies in the media and on college campuses, portraying him as a disruptor who gave a voice to everyday Americans. This connection brought Charlie into Trump's inner circle, where he became a trusted advisor and prominent supporter throughout Trump's presidency. A voice for conservative students. Even as his national profile grew, Kirk never abandoned his focus on students. He often said that the classroom was the new battleground for America's future. Through Turning Point USA, he created initiatives to provide support for students who felt bullied, silenced, or punished for expressing conservative beliefs. While Charlie Kirk's career was marked by rallies, speeches, and media appearances, his personal life told a different story, one rooted in love, family, and unwavering Christian faith. In 2021, Charlie married Erika, a podcaster, entrepreneur, and former Miss Arizona USA. Erika, like Charlie, was outspoken about her faith and her values. Their union was celebrated widely within conservative circles, with many supporters seeing them as a power couple committed to both activism and Christianity. A year later, their lives changed forever with the birth of their daughter. To those who knew Charlie personally, fatherhood transformed him. He often said that while his work gave him purpose, his family gave him true meaning. In interviews and speeches, Charlie referenced his wife and daughter often, describing them as his greatest blessing. He talked about how the fight for America's future was no longer just political for him. It was personal. He wanted his daughter to grow up in a country where her faith and values would be protected. Despite his relentless travel schedule, Charlie carved out time for his family. Friends recalled that he would rush home after events, eager to spend time with Erika and their child. In quieter moments away from the spotlight, Charlie leaned heavily on his Christian faith. The morning of September 10, 2025, began like any other for Charlie Kirk, but by mid-afternoon it would become one of the darkest days in modern American politics. Charlie was in Orem, Utah, preparing to speak at Utah Valley University, UVU, as part of his American Comeback Tour. This was meant to be the first major stop in a campaign designed to re-energize young conservatives on college campuses across the country. The event had been heavily promoted online. By the time doors opened, more than 3,000 people had gathered inside the UCCU Center. Students, parents, local supporters, and national followers who had traveled from hours away. The atmosphere was electric. Supporters waved flags, held banners, and cheered as the stage lights dimmed and the music quieted. Charlie walked onto the stage dressed sharply, smiling as the crowd erupted into applause. He was in his element, energized, confident, and ready to deliver another speech that blended politics, faith, and encouragement for America's youth. For nearly 20 minutes, he spoke with his usual passion. He talked about the future of the country, the role of young conservatives, and the importance of courage in standing for truth. His words rang out across the arena, "Never let anyone silence you. Stand firm in your faith, stand firm in your values, and never apologize for believing in truth." But at 2:20 p.m., everything changed. The fatal shot. A sudden crack split the air. At first, many thought it was a microphone popping or some sort of stage malfunction, but in the next second, screams erupted as the reality set in. A sniper's bullet had struck Charlie Kirk in the neck. He stumbled, clutching at his shirt as blood began to spread, before collapsing to the floor of the stage. Panic swept the arena like wildfire. People screamed. Some ducked under chairs while others rushed for the exits. Parents shielded their children as the crowd surged, knocking over chairs and trampling belongings in their desperate attempt to flee. The sound of terror, shrieks, sobs, and chaos filled the air. On stage, security and staff rushed to Charlie's side. Medical responders stationed at the event scrambled forward, applying pressure to the wound and shouting for supplies. But the shot had been precise and devastating. Within minutes, it was clear that the wound was fatal. At 2:38 p.m., Charlie Kirk was pronounced dead. He was only 31 years old. Chaos and fear. Meanwhile, law enforcement rushed to locate the shooter. Within hours, investigators found a high-powered bolt-action rifle abandoned near a service corridor outside the UCCU Center. Forensic teams moved in, but the assassin had already escaped. The assassination of Charlie Kirk on September 10, 2025, sent shockwaves across the United States. In a single moment, a 31-year-old husband, father, and national figure was silenced before thousands of witnesses. A nation in mourning. In the days that followed, grief rippled through communities across the country. At Utah Valley University, where Kirk had been speaking, students and residents held a massive vigil outside the UCCU Center. Candles flickered against the night sky, flowers were laid across the steps, and prayers rose from thousands of voices. Survivors stood shoulder to shoulder, some still trembling as they recalled the chaos of that afternoon. In Phoenix, Arizona, home to Turning Point USA, another crowd gathered to honor the man who had founded a movement. Signs bearing phrases like "Justice for Charlie" and "Carry the Torch" filled the air, the family's grief. At the center of this tragedy was Charlie's wife, Erika, and their 2 young children, a son and a daughter. In her first public statement, Erika shared words that pierced hearts across the nation. "Charlie was my best friend, my husband, and the father of our children. We are devastated. Please pray for our son and daughter who will grow up knowing who their father was and what he stood for. His mission, his faith, and his love for our family will never be forgotten." Her words became a rallying cry, reminding the country that beyond politics, this was a story of a young family suddenly forced to carry on without the man who anchored them. Political and cultural fallout. The political response was immediate. President Donald Trump addressed the nation, calling Kirk a warrior for truth, a patriot, and one of the most courageous young leaders America has ever known. He promised that the federal government would use every resource to track down those responsible. Charlie Kirk's story will forever stand as both a triumph and a tragedy. From an ordinary kid in Illinois to founding Turning Point USA at 18, to becoming one of the most recognizable conservative voices in America, his rise was meteoric. But above all, he was a man of Christian faith, a husband devoted to Erika, and a father to 2 children who will grow up carrying his legacy. His assassination left behind grief, outrage, and unanswered questions. The shooter remains unidentified, and the investigation continues. But Charlie's impact did not end with his death. It lives on in the students he inspired, in the organization he built, and in the family that bears his name. This is the life, faith, and legacy of Charlie Kirk, a man whose voice was stolen too soon, but whose influence endures. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk. Your voice, your faith, and your legacy will never be forgotten. Thank you for watching True Crime After Dark. If you believe these stories deserve to be told, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with others, so we can continue shining a light on the darkest corners of the human story.